Right, we're joined now by a lawyer and Arise analyst Frank Tietie. Frank, it's good to see you on Newsnight tonight. I mean, how does this come to you when you hear that the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, spent in 5 years 12 billion naira without approval?
What comes to mind is the welfare of judges. They keep complaining that there's no money to give them adequate welfare package. The Supreme Court justices at the time rebelled against the Chief Justice of Nigeria. A number of them said that he was busy carrying his family, himself and wives and children to enjoy himself abroad, while the other justices were struggling to write judgments. And so there was a sort of mutiny that was about to take place in the Supreme Court, but it was arrested. Several other justices at that time complained. And I read Premium Times' very copious report on this story, and which cited Justice Ekwe Jembi having at the time complained and called on the anti-corruption agencies to come and investigate the Supreme Court. So it doesn't come as a surprise, because we're talking about administration here that is supposedly under the control of the Chief Registrar of the Supreme Court, and many Chief Registrars across Nigeria have all actually been accused of corruption. But again, it also brings to mind some relief that beyond the 2017 report by the National Bureau of Statistics on the Corruption Perception Survey in Nigeria, we have an active office of the Auditor General of the Federation that is doing its job in accordance to Section 86 and 87 of the Constitution, and then also in expectation that the National Assembly will do its job. But the interesting part again, and that I like the level of independence of that report by the Auditor General, also accuses the Supreme Court management of having paid a certain amount, hundreds of billions, in the National Assembly, running over about 826 million naira, over thereabouts, to the members of the National Assembly. Yeah. And for me, the Auditor General was quite professional in simply stating the facts the way they are. However, I expected that he should have recommended the swift investigation and prosecution of those members of the National Assembly that whoever collected such monies. And for what would the Supreme Court ever pay money to members of the National Assembly? For what? If it ever procured attempted to procure broadcast equipment which were non-existent, I would understand, because I remember that period in 2016, 2017, I led a campaign to the Supreme Court asking it that it should broadcast its live proceedings. There should be live proceedings of its live broadcast of its proceedings, you know, including judgments and all of that. But how would that kind of money, over 600 million, said to be expended, and no equipment was actually found? So the level of sleaze, graft, and corruption in the Supreme Court is mind-boggling, but not so surprising.
Well, mind-boggling. I want to say on that, 5 years, Frank.
Yes, indeed.
5 years.
Yes.
And we just getting to uncover this, or this is coming to the fore. Where do you think the country can start to address this? Because we're talking about people who should know the law.
No, again, let's just make
an institution.
Let's make a distinction. Let's make a distinction.
Right.
It is the administration of the Supreme Court, and the head of the administration of the Supreme Court in this case is the Chief Registrar, not necessarily the justices who are learned in law. Let me say that. Let me make that distinction. However, you make a reference to the fact for 5 years it took this long for this report to actually uncover this kind of corruption. The truth about it is that somehow it's very difficult to obtain data in our country. And the Office of the Auditor General, this current Auditor General, I believe, appears to be quite proactive. He's trying to meet up, because this report was actually published in 2023. However, we have had previous Auditors General who should have made this publication. Interestingly, the Auditor General answers to the National Assembly. So not necessarily to the president or to the Nigerian people directly, but to the Nigerian people through the National Assembly. I think that it's better late than never, and we've seen it now. But you see, if you look at, I tried to look at the the Corruption Perception Index of the Transparency International, and realized that indeed the corruption was very high Nigeria was ranking quite high as at 2016, that same period, you know. But Nigeria had some of its worst days of corruption in 2022, probably as the administration of President Buhari approached its twilight.
Are we saying, Frank, that corruption has been institutionalized in Nigeria?
Well,
is that where we are really? Because this is a tainting of the Supreme Court.
No, corruption is
the executive,
corruption,
the legislature. Everybody seems to be in on this one.
Yes, corruption, whether it's embedded in our public service, let's kind of understand. Because what does it really take now for the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission to wade in? What does it take for the EFCC to take interest in it? Are they waiting for the presidential directive? The only time, you see, you know, corruption is, in the sense that it's expected, is a part of a way of sharing national resources only to the privileged, and that's why the president is being welcomed home with all those protests in Kano and Niger, because corruption will only lead to some few persons, you know, amassing money for themselves and then impoverishing the system, only for people to get to a point where they get so angry and then they turn against the system. No, not much really works in our country, because public service, the perception of public service is that it's a privileged opportunity for those who are there to enrich themselves and keep on enriching themselves. And how could a chief registrar preside over the expenditure of 12 billion naira over a period of time, and the system could not pick it? So the idea is that we run a system that does not prevent corruption, that allows corruption to thrive and to be enjoyed by those persons who are privileged to be in the public service, and after they have gone and they probably declared support for the incoming president, or go and hold rallies for the president, President Tinubu, and then all their sins will be forgiven and everything will be set under the carpet. ICPC will not do anything, EFCC will not do anything. Political, you know, covering for corruption. It's a way of life here.
And Frank, it brings us, well, we can't call it a way of life. There's still great men like yourself and others there. So let's get...
No, it's their way of life.
Good.
It's their way of
life.
So let's look at the argument about building strong institutions, because sometimes it looks as if the individual, the strong and upright individual, is needed to build in strong institutions, because now we're getting a new general who's done this.
I think we need an active citizenry. You know what? We have financial regulations, some of the best in terms of quality and standard across the entire world. We have them in operation in Nigeria. So, and there is supposed to be a system of checks and balances between, among, you know, officials of government in ensuring probity, accountability, and a measure of transparency. But when a situation where you find, just like Ngozi said, you know, a network of cooperators between those who are supposed to check themselves now cooperate, and then they do a clinical, surgical job in ensuring and, you know, enthroning a system of corruptly enriching themselves. Who is going to catch them? And then when you see one kind of mindless opacity that I read in that report, that speaks, that defines the finances of the Supreme Court, for example. How are you going to get information? How are you going to... So what stops the Supreme Court from making its expenditure public? You know, so, but you don't know anything. In fact, you have to go to court to go and get an order of court to compel a public official to make public a normal public document. So, very importantly, what do we do with this report? Where is it even going to go? Just like the rest, because I tried to inquire from the reports. I said, what's the end of all of this? The idea is that sometimes we thrive, we enjoy the sensational, the salacious story that comes from the fact that somebody has stolen again. I was in court the other day. The other fellow who was said to have stolen 109 billion was there, enjoying himself, looking much at peace. So it appears it's just entertaining, you know, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. President Tinubu must take a different turn. And again, we expect some proactivity from the ICPC and the leadership of the EFCC. They don't need any command. They don't need to be afraid that they will hurt the president's supporters or the support base if they go after. I don't expect. And again, should civil society organizations stay on the sideline and watch. If EFCC and ICPC fail, there is what we call an order of mandamus. Go to court and tell ICPC or those leading EFCC that, look, you don't just collect salaries for nothing. Go ahead and investigate the Supreme Court. Come on and prosecute those you have to prosecute. But again, they are afraid. These are judges we are talking about. In case, before you know it, somehow there's one fear among prosecutors that don't tamper with issues that have to do with the court, because the network of judges may just don't like you, and then it will not be good for you.
We must stay on this. Frank Tietie, a Rise News analyst and lawyer. Many thanks as always.